Now we have to continue, and it's my greatest pleasure to welcome Audrey Tang, the Digital Minister of Taiwan, who is an inspiration for many, many governments around the world. Audrey Tang has done so much in the field of open data, in the field of open government. She was involved, and she is involved in the Open Government Partnership. And as we know, she has done a great job during the pandemic. Taiwan is a success story, and we would like to learn a bit more when it comes to digital social innovation. Why digital social innovation is so important for democracies nowadays. Dear Audrey, we are happy to see you. Thanks for your time. The floor is yours. Hello from Berlin.
Good local time, everyone. Can you see my slides?
Just a second, we need to adapt a bit, I think. Now it's better, now it works. Many thanks.
Excellent. Right, so again, good local time, everyone. I'm really happy to share with you some stories about how we countered the pandemic with no lockdown and an infodemic with no takedown, essentially, for the past couple of years. And the root is that we work with the people, not just for the people, and that's the root of social innovation. It always begins with transparency, and I'm a minister that practice radical transparency. You're looking at my office, literally my office. It's a public park. Anyone can walk in and book 40 minutes of my time, and because we've not had lockdowns, some of these are face-to-face, and the journalists, lobbyists, and so on all visited me on one condition, though, that everything that we said is of the public domain. It's either published as a transcript in the Say It's website, pictured above, or as a YouTube a Creative Commons video allowing free remix. And in this way, people add on each other's idea, they build upon each other's components, and the lobbyists that talk to me always speak from an angle of global sustainability and partnership and benefiting the next generation, because if they say something that is only good for them but not for the next generation, it will look very bad on public record. And so that is the kind of ground for social innovation, the Social Innovation Lab, that the social innovations that I outlined begin to sprout and help us in the counter-pandemic works. For example, we have a digital equivalent of that town square in the digital realm called the PTT. For the past 25 years, PTT is run by academic network, free of advertisers or shareholders, enjoying tremendous freedom of speech. Of course, the code is free as in freedom, GPL v3, and the governance is also distributed to all the constituents of the PTT. And that's the place when at the end of 2019, when Dr. Li Wenliang's message that there were 7 SARS cases in the Wuhan, Huanan seafood market spread to PTT, immediately people triaged the message so that we began health inspection the very next day, the first day of 2020. I would argue that it's because in this pro-social social forum, the people concentrated not on polarizing hatred and other divergence of conversations, but rather on a convergent conversation that builds a good enough consensus, a rough consensus on what the virus is, so that we establish the Central Epidemic Command Center or the CECC almost immediately on the January. Now, of course, it's not just limited for people who have the habit of accessing online forums. I'm sure that many young people or many senior people do not have the habit of frequenting such forums. So we also built a toll-free number, the 1922, that everyone can call and just speak to someone with a lot of empathy from a call center or from a professional charity. For example, last April, there was a young boy calling saying, hey, you're starting to ration out masks, which is great, but all I got is pink ones, which is not great. I'm a boy, I don't want to wear pink to school. All the boys in my class have navy blue masks. Well, the very next day on the daily 2 p.m. press conference, all the officers wore pink, and that's at the suggestion of the participation officer, the officer embedded in each and every ministry in charge of civic engagement, that a Minister of Health and Welfare, Chen Shizhong, said a Pink Panther is his childhood hero. So the boy became the most hip boy in the class, for only he has the the color that the heroes wear, and the heroes hero wear. Of course, it's not just about fashion statements and pink and rainbow mask. It's also about data trust, collaboratives, and altruism, right? So when we start rationing out mask, already there's hundreds of different tools that's prepared by the social sector, the civil society, the most prominent of which called G0V or Gov0, to look at all the government digital services, something that GOV, the TW, and fork it's to build something that G0V, the TW, who's an alternate imagination of how it could work. And we maximally trust these civic hackers by opening up the open data in a real-time fashion. So every 30 seconds, like a distributed ledger, we publish the real-time inventory of all the spots, pharmacies, and so on that sells those masks so that people do not have to queue in vain. And indeed, when they queue in line, they can see the person before them purchasing a few masks and actually the number deducts. So while it was a scarcity at that time of the 2020, people do not panic and there's no conspiracy theories and things like that because people can participate in the auditing of the data themselves and also analyze the data bias and suggest, as per the OpenStreetMap community, a better distribution algorithm for the mask that enable the rapid adoption of mask wearing and so on. And now, come this year in May, when we first are really the only wave so far, we also work with Gov0, who made this excellent system where you just point your building camera to this QR code without having to download any app. And it sends a toll-free message to 1922. Again, no input needed. So what it does is that this is multi-party computation. Your telecom carrier keeps this record for 28 days and then delete it. But they do not know what those 15 digits correspond to. Only the venue owner knows that. So in this way, privacy is not compromised because it's securely stored in 7 or more different federated entities, and none of the data stores have this complete whereabouts that's reserved for contact tracers. And we rule that it's for epidemic control use only, not even the wiretapping laws and so on can have the access to such records. And each and every one of our citizens can verify it's true by going to this website, entering their phone number, and look at this reverse audit of which municipalities, which contact tracer, look at those SMS posts in the past 28 days. And out of the almost 3 billions now sent, only a small fraction, like 12 million or so, have been accessed this way and a complete record kept. And so this transparency report generate again on the fly, not every quarter or something, assures people that it is only being used for its originally declared purposes. And that's what allow us to shorten the contact tracing time for each infected case from 24 hours or more to less than 24 minutes. That immediately let us squash the alpha and then later on delta wave, so that it's been a few months now with essentially no locally confirmed cases. So I think one of the main lessons that we have learned in the past few years working with social innovators is that they prefer reverse procurement. That is to say, the solutions appear not from some company or from the state, but rather from the free software community like this one, the AI assistive intelligence powered conversation method that is from AGPO3 Polis. And then we reverse procure it, meaning that we supply the necessary data and computational resources and so on, so that the social sector continue to run the public infrastructure, just like PTC, but the state benefit from the co-creation with civil society. So for example, on Polis, the GOV.TW, which is essentially the same code as Polis.TW, so dual use, what we're using is basically a way to crowdsource the people's feelings around the same sort of facts. Now, of course, the people's feelings will diverge, but this way we can converge it rather quickly. For example, there was a real conversation in 2015 about Uber X. Now, I can see my friends and families in different opinion clusters, but when I share my feelings, like I prefer passenger liability insurance to be mandatory regardless of Uber classification of gig economy or sharing economy, if you agree with me, you move forward to me. If you disagree with me, you distance away from me, but there's no reply button, so no room for troll to grow. And in this assistive intelligence powered pro-social social media, the trolls don't have a field day. If you get 2,000 people voting exactly the same way, it doesn't increase the plurality. And so the area of each cluster will not change, but we only hold ourselves to account to answer for the crowdsource consensus that are on the left side. So on the right side are those ideological statements like platform versus gig versus sharing economy. But on this side, it's not undercutting existing meters, empowering local tempos, and and churches in their local fleets, surge pricing and things like that. And these actually more people agree with each other, with their neighbors on those topics than they originally imagined. So that allows us to quickly crowdsource the key performance indicators in a way that is truly democratic and increasing the bandwidth democracy from, just a few bits every 4 years called voting to essentially continuous day-to-day. Anyone who collects more than 5,000 signatures can start such a interagency collaboration meeting. And I think this is a democracy of agency, not just of vote. Of course, I don't have time to go into the other parts in the Radical Civics, but you can check it out at radicalcivics.cc. So to close, I believe my own work as a digital minister is kind of tying together the collaboratives from the economic, environmental, and societal sectors through effective partnership on reliable data with open innovation. So I'll just quickly read through my job description and I look forward to the conversation that afterwards. So this is my job description. When we see the Internet of Things, let's make it an Internet of Beings. When we see virtual reality, let's make it a shared reality. When we see machine learning, let's make it collaborative learning. When we see user experience, let's make it about human experience. And whenever we hear that a singularity is near, well, let's always remember the plurality is here. Thank you for listening.
Audrey, are you here or?
I'm here.
Yeah, perfect. I think it was really a remarkable story that it's not that easy to replicate. How come that, you have regular contacts with many governments. You're telling all around your success story of open government and open data, but it doesn't work elsewhere. Why? What do you think?
I think to give no trust is to get no trust. So really the key to make all this happen is for the public service to trust our citizens. Whenever in a smaller jurisdiction like a town or a municipality, we see this kind of trust from the public service to the citizens, we see this kind of data-based partnership thrive.
I have a question that I'm going to ask later in the afternoon to the French digital minister and to our CEO and state secretary in the Federal Ministry of Interior. And that's, do we need a socially functioning compromise between personal data on the one hand and innovations and public interest on the other? Thinking again of the pandemic and issues related to data protection.
Well, this is like asking, do we need to trade off between sustainability and development, right? Which at some point in the past, it may be necessary to make such trade-offs. But nowadays, under the umbrella of sustainable development, we're now thinking of ways like circular economy and new types of energy sources and so on that takes care of both the sustainability and the development. So in the field of personal data protection, privacy enhancing technologies plays the kind of role that a kind of, impossible burger and beyond meat plays. It's basically taking care of both sides. Our National Center for High-Speed Computation recently worked with me to popularize a set of basically videos, memes really, about federated learning, split learning in particular, homomorphic encryption, post-quantum in particular, about the synthetic data via differential privacy and so on. And we have utilized these ideas. I've talked about multi-party computation in our contact tracing part, and I'm really excited to think of the latest improvements of post-quantum homomorphic encryption, because that means that we solve the very old dilemma of me trusting the health agency trusting the high-speed computation center, but it's not transitive, right? I don't trust the NCHC. And now with homomorphic encryption, you don't have to make this compromise. The health data can be encrypted, send for the high-speed computation, do all the computation it needs without looking into the encrypted data, and then sending data back, and then we decrypt and receive the personalized computation results. And I think these new forms of technologies allow us to maximize the usability of data without any compromise on the personal data protection mandates.
Many thanks. There is also possibility for questions from the audience. Think of it. Well, I'm asking Audrey something else in the meantime. You know that some people in Europe consider the GDPR as a barrier for innovation. What's the relationship between your data protection regulation and the European one? In what
Well,
relation
we're
are we
seeking,
currently?
yeah. We're at the moment seeking GDPR adequacy because our Personal Data Protection Act was adapted from the European one pre-GDPR. So our root concerns are very similar. I think the only thing that's the difference is that in Taiwan, each and every ministry, each and every competent authority is its own data protection office, whereas the GDPR mandates a single independent body, and we're still working on that. But in Taiwan, this federated way, I would argue, also creates a stronger data norm. That is to say, instead of saying that all the data related to personal issues need to have the same norm, the Ministry of Health and Welfare works very differently as compared to the Ministry of Interior or Environmental Protection or things like that. And the reason why is just like there's no single textual norm, right? What's the text norm? There's a norm for journalism. There's a norm for peer review, academic publishing, and things like that with different competent authorities. So it allows us to take essentially the European ideas around data dignity, altruism, coalitions, and trust, but interpret it in a way that is fit for the norm on the competent authority based previously on text, just turning it to data instead of seeking one unifying data norm around all sorts of different kinds of personal data.
You're quite aware of the principles of the GDPR, thinking of the first place of the purpose limitation.
Yes.
How would you commend it in respect to innovation?
Yeah, I would say, for example, when we roll out the SMS-based contact tracing, because we're after all not Singapore, it's not mandatory. That means that people can choose to use paper and pen based or even stamp their way into the public venues, which admittedly made contact tracing harder, takes longer time to collect from those decentralized paper-based registries. But if they trust the local venues with the pen and paper records more than their telecom carriers with secure multi-party computation, well, we can't say no. And that's the real difference because we're a pluralistic democracy. All the innovations need to be done in a way that has a graceful relationship with the people who prefer the previous generation of privacy enhancing technology, in this case, kind of slips of paper put into a box, right? And so I believe that this clear sense of purpose mandated us to basically work in a government, but on the norm that's set by the social sector. So when they say each and every SMS message need to say for contact tracing purpose only, we have to implement that. When they ask for an interpretation that the wiretapping people, the people investigating even major crimes cannot look at the SMS check-ins, we have to do that because after all, the specification is set by the civil society, not by a company, not by a state. So I call this a people-public-private partnership. So if the social sector have a reliable way to come up with the norms and habits, I would argue, of course, we need to be specific to that purpose.
Thank you very much. Before asking you something regarding the open government partnership, maybe we have some question in the room. Oliver Rack from the Open Government Network, Germany. Please, short, Oli, introduce yourself and you have the opportunity for a question.
Okay, thank you. It's Oliver Rack, Open Government Network, Germany. Hello. You said it's about building trust, that's for sure. And isn't it, in addition, a question or a factor of collective learning, an intersectoral learning, which is the benefit of open government? And have you special experience with that in Taiwan? Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. In Taiwan, in our basic education system starting in 2019, a couple years ago, we switched from the term literacy, like digital literacy, media literacy, data literacy, to the term competence, data competence, media competence. The difference is that literacy is in the age of radio and television, where people just consume the messages. And competence is when people make the messages themselves. So for example, in our primary school, I think all of our primary school have something called the airbox, where people in a very young age, primary school people, can learn about climate science by measuring measuring PM 2.5 and other air qualities and so on, and contribute to a ledger, distributed ledger, maintained by our National Academy. And that ensures that people learn about making an impact to their community. Previously difficult to teach concepts like stewardship, bias, right? Joint controllership become very easy to learn when the kids understand that the decision of their family members on whether to go to jog this morning actually depends on the accuracy of their data contributed in the airbox. Or in the middle school, the school children basically can check the presidential candidates as they're having the presidential debates and forums in real time, so that it's their media competence assignments when they fact check the presidential candidate and they discover something is missing. The public TV and other public media work with them immediately so that the fact checks are displayed in real time. And for example, more than 1/4 of our join the GOV, the TW Citizen Initiative platform is raised by the people under 18 years old, like banning plastic straws from our bubble tea drinks, takeouts, and so on. And again, when I asked the 17-year-old, why are you bringing this very impactful petition? She's like, oh, it's our civics class assignment. So I hope these 3 anecdotes show how the competence education works and how it's easier to learn rather than to be taught proper data stewardship.
Many thanks. We have one member of European Parliament that would like to ask you something. Damien, please, the floor is yours.
Yes, first of all, thank you, Minister. This has been extremely inspiring to see how you work and how you dealt also with the COVID crisis. And I have a question on that, and which is a bit more out of curiosity than fully connected to what you have been discussing, which is how do you work with the other ministers in your government? How do you ensure that you actually have the power to implement these solutions across different sectoral, if you want, competences? I would just like to learn also for our German context, and I think almost all European context. Thank you.
Definitely. Well, I work with the government. I don't work for the government. So again, I work with the people, not for the people. So I'm kind of at this Lagrange point where the social movements, the civic technologies on one side and the career public service on the other. I found that the most useful way to work with other ministries is ask for voluntary association for them to send secondments to my office and also to build something like my office within their ministry, what we call participation officers. And then we switch the roles of the breakout groups and facilitators. So for example, in 2017, when we crowdsourced ideas on how to change our tax filing service for the better, the breakout groups were facilitated by not the tax agency participation officer, but maybe by the coastal guard. But when we, a couple years later, talk about the ocean policy, how to navigate the surfing and amateur fishing and professional fishing concerns and things like that, well, the breakout groups are facilitated not by the coastal guard, but maybe the tax agency participation officer. And the reason is very simple, because the coastal guard also files their own tax, right? And the financial ministry or the tax agency participation officer is also an avid surfer or amateur fisher. So by putting them in the role of citizens, facilitating such cross-sectoral conversations, citizens feel for the first time that a central government officer is actually taking their side, because it's not their business to defend a silo, it's their business to advocate to the actual citizens' need. So that's just one of the very concrete way for us to trust the citizens.
Many thanks. Maybe the very last question to our CEO of the Konrad-Adenauer Foundation and the former president of the German Parliament, Professor Lahmann, the floor is yours.
Thanks. Whenever we talk on data regulation in Germany, we necessarily talk about European solutions, whether we get it or not, but we are at least aware there is a need for supranational solutions. What about supranational solutions in Asia or even beyond Asia, global perspectives? Do they exist at all, and under which potential framework conditions?
That's a great question. Of course, in Taiwan, we're part of the Global Cooperation and Training Framework, or the GCTF, where we work with the US, Japan, Australia, and so on the kind of enabling competence conversations around many different matters, not just data. So there is something like that that we're a part of. But frankly speaking, I think when I talk about data altruism, trust, data trust, and dignity, and so on, I sometimes say that, it's the European spirit. So the work that you're doing in Europe, I think, has a very inspiring contribution to the conversation in Taiwan to inspire us to look beyond the kind of false dilemma, as I said, between large corporations on one side and a very large state on the other, to remind us it's not about making the citizens transparent to the state or to some companies, but rather to make the companies and the state transparent to the people. So in that sense, I think we're also very European in attitude.
Many thanks. Dear Audrey, thinking of transparency, participation, collaboration reminds you immediately to the Open Government Partnership. We had difficult birth in Germany. Now we have the second action plan. How do you consider the movement? Why is so important?
Yeah, in Taiwan, we're now, of course, on our first national action plan, but not just the open government plan, but also the open parliament plan. Actually, today is the Open Parliament Forum, and we talk about open innovations in terms of bubble tea, this lunch. But what I'm trying to get at is that in Taiwan, this is not a partisan matter. All of our four leading parties signed on the open parliament proceedings and crowdsourced with the civil society. So it's very important in Taiwan because that's one of the very few truly nonpartisan issues, deepening our democracy, linking to international counterparts. Personally, I'm going also to share something that I just shared with you on the Summit for Democracy. That's a US-led multi-participant forum and things like that. So I think this is something that truly unites everyone in Taiwan. And we also very much unite under this banner called Taiwan Can Help, meaning that we can and we really want to share the models that I have just shared to really any democracies around the world.
Many thanks. I said in the beginning, you're inspiration for many governments, but also for many young people. Please keep on your mission. Please visit us one day in Berlin. I know half an hour is not enough for such a discussion with you. You matter to us. Many, many thanks and best wishes to Taiwan.
Definitely. Live long and prosper.